Peace to the gods, Yusef here. What a message about today's topic, which is plenary power. I want to talk about plenary power. I think that is a very important topic to discuss because I don't think a lot of people really understand the significance of plenary powers. So I'm going to try to explain it right now. When they got rid of the gold and silver, that is what created a very expansive reach for a government. Um, we essentially ceded some of our sovereignty over to them by giving them the gold and silver. The gold and silver represented sovereignty, and we gave it over to them. So with the giving over that, and then having to accept benefits and privileges in the form of using Federal Reserve notes to discharge debt with, because we're using Federal Reserve notes, um, which get taxed because it is a benefit and a privilege. Uh, it's almost like, they took our gold and silver and then put us in some, it is almost, I don't want to call it a form of slavery because it is voluntary. And I'm going to get to that a little later on. It's voluntary, but, it is kind of egregious, the situation that our public servants put us in back during that time. Um, Very egregious. It was very egregious what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did, in my opinion. Uh, they submitted everybody to the jurisdiction of the United States because now you can't engage in private transactions with each other. You have to use the things that they have produced for you to use. And that the Federal Reserve Act is a product of that, um, of the plenary power doctrine. This is why jurisdiction is important, but you got to understand you can't declare yourself out of jurisdiction. You have you have to uh, you have to structure yourself within their framework for optimal results. Okay, for optimal results, you can't totally escape it. You got to stop trying to totally escape it. You have to learn how to operate within it. But even if you learn how to operate within it, you can win. You can win operating within it. Okay. But you're trying to operate outside of it, you're just going to be looked at as some sort of, terrorist. That's going to give you a terrorist label. And you don't want to get that with the United States. I think that the only people that really uh, think that that is something that's cool to do are people who have never been locked up before. You know, those are the only people that really talk like that. But once they get the experience of being locked up, I think that they will reconsider their positions a lot and pull back a lot if they just really understood the realities, of some positions that people take and where it could lead to. Um, and in many forms, if you're just going into court and trying to defend yourself using maybe a faulty uh, process or something like that, that you learned in an echo chamber, and that could lead to some very serious results. This is why when I first came into this, I always taught people to do independent study. See, because the only person that you really should be depending on is yourself and your own understanding. You can't lean too much into other people's interpretations of things, not even mine. Not even mine. I'll admit, I have interpretations. I stand on mine pretty solid. I think they're very well researched, but there's always the possibility I could be wrong. And I think as a prudent man, you should always be willing to allow for the possibility that you're wrong, to be open. That's how you're going to keep on learning, and that requires humility and integrity. Uh, but you should engage in independent study, and you got to lean heavily on looking up the meaning of words. You have to lean heavily on looking up the meaning of words. Understanding the meaning of words is crucial in their proper context. Also within the framework that they are operating in, like statutory definitions, they take priority of a lot of different things if statutory law is applying. They take priority over everything else. So you have to understand what those words mean that they define within statute, because everything begins with a statute. It goes through whether or not it is an artificial person or a natural person, and then the capacity that person was acting in, and then the classification of conduct and a determination of rights, benefits, liabilities, and duties, or whatever is to be afforded to you. It's a system that they use, and you can all you can do is really create a framework for yourself. So when you have to interface with it, you can get optimal results. And that's why it requires um, planning and education to do first. It's not nothing that you can declare yourself. It's not nothing you can declare yourself into. Like a lot of people try to do. That's one of the faults that's in a lot of processes, and uh, including secure party. Uh, and it's this understanding of the word person. It's it's almost like a curse when you just keep on studying this stuff, and you just keep growing and growing in your understanding, and then you get to a point where you're like, man, the way I used to see this was very, very childish. You start to see it for what it is. And uh, a lot of you, if you are doing any type of serious study, you're going to get to that point. You're going to get to that point. If you're studying this, like I know some of you are there, I know some of y'all are out there studying this. I know you are. And but as you keep continue to grow in your understanding, you're going to reach some different perceptions about things. And then you're going to realize what you allow to influence you. And then you're going to have to reevaluate things and come to a conclusion that you need to depend on your own understanding of things. You ask God for understanding, you know, but trust that He will provide you with a way to get that understanding. And so when you feel comfortable with it, after you've done a significant amount of due diligence, only then do you adopt it. Only then do you adopt it. You don't you just don't take things because you like the person, or you like the way somebody said something, or something like that, or you like the personality of this person and you dislike the personality of this person over here. You cannot allow that to be um, the lamp that guides your feet while navigating this terrain that we call law. uh, you can't do that. A lot of things that were told to us in the beginning. I mean, I'm not saying all of it is wrong, um, but a great deal of it is. And that's why today I was talking about plenary power. This is important to understand. Plenary power is a principle of separation of powers. Each individual branch within their domain, they are all powerful. This is how they form checks and balances on each other. What is incumbent upon you is to not go within their jurisdiction. Okay, you can't go in their area. You have to be very cautious of how you enter their domain. They make the rules in their domain, and that domain is what's carved out within the Constitution. You know, the Supreme Court is the one that decides the boundaries. That's why it's important for you to understand case law, so you can understand that line that separates public and private. The judges will explain it to you. They'll explain it to you. A lot of times it's going to be in a sophisticated way. So, reading case law requires you to get to a level where you can really understand some complex legalese. You need to get to a point where you can understand some complex legalese, because that will increase your understanding when you do. When you do, you can't approach this in a half-hearted way. It is really for the people who should be teaching this. They should be getting paid, because that should be all that they are doing. Because this encompasses your life, bringing information like this to people, because you have a responsibility of continually educating yourself all the time if you're going to be a good leader in this particular space. And to be able to do that, it should be a full-time job. It's a full-time job, and the listeners and the people who support a person should support him financially. If you want to keep getting that information from him, because it will take care of his life. And if he is devoted to bringing you the information, he will continue to do so. You will see that he will continue to do so. And that's how you keep your people that you like listening to and keeping them going, the people you listen to. That's how it is, because this is private information. This is not, it's going to require some researchers. The space has to have researchers. So the researchers have to be compensated. They got to be compensated. You have to either give while you're looking at their video, give, something like that, buy something from them off their website or do something like that, but do something to support them because everyone, I will say, because I've probably been hard on a lot of them, but I would say this, even to get to the level of understanding that most of them have, that took a lot of effort. That took a lot of effort to get to that point. It really did. But you can just look back, and it's not me being arrogant in any way, because it's not being arrogant. It's just I traveled the pathway, so I can look back down and I can see the pathway they're walking that I've already walked, and I'm just looking at it from that vantage point. I've already walked that, so all I can do is either offer some words of wisdom, but ultimately it is the individual's decision on which way they want to go, and that's completely fine. It's all an experience. It's all an experience, and you could enjoy that route. You could enjoy that route. I know I did. I did. It had its ups and downs, but uh, it definitely had its ups and downs. But for the most part, I'm grateful and I'm thankful, and for everything, including my listeners, including the people who support me and follow me. Um, I, I really, really appreciate you over all these years. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace. I'm out.